Whenever we buy a new model kit, we always come across these little round discs. Typically they're round, sometimes you get them in square, but they always come in a variety of different sizes and sometimes shapes, depending on the model. If you're somebody that likes to play the games, there's absolutely nothing wrong with not adding anything to these bases, but they can take your models from pretty simple to looking like they're part of a story, part of an environment. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to turn one of these blank discs into an environment that you would be happy to have your army displayed on. Let's get started. For the lava base, you're not going to really need too many materials. You're going to need the base, a bit of corkboard, some super glue, and any paint of your choice. Now, this is going to be an example of a simple base. So I'm going to be using a bit of that corkboard, going to rip a chunk of it off, and that's what the model is going to be standing on. And what I'm going to do to this is I'm going to start picking at the edges. You can either use your thumbnail if you've got nails, and that'll get rid of some of the bigger chunks, or you could even go in with a pair of tweezers and take up some little smaller bits of it if you want to add just a little bit more detail for a dry brush later. I'm just going to be adding some little dots of super glue. I'm making sure that I add this to the base and not to the cork, because the cork is going to absorb a lot of that glue. So it's easier to add it to the base first and then quickly press on the cork later. This is going to make sure that it sticks nice and it's not going to be moving anywhere. Then, to add a little bit of diversity, I'm going to use some of them bits that I ripped off this first bit. I'm going to make some other little channels that the lava is going to run through. After priming black, I'm going to add a bit of white scar, some thinner and some white ink into my airbrush. And after testing the consistency of the paint on a spare base, I'm going to spray this on to all the parts that are going to be lava. Adding this white undercoat is really going to make those colours pop. Now, I made sure that I did this in a fair few coats, as the ink is going to prevent it from drying very quick. So I make sure to do a lot of small coats, allowing it to dry in between, making sure that the airbrush is further enough away so that it doesn't take too long to dry before moving on to the next layer. Then I moved on to Evil Sunz Scarlet and did exactly the same process, but having that white undercoat once again is going to make this colour pop a lot better. After getting my Evil Sunz Scarlet to the right shade, I then added some Fire Dragon Bright into the mix, making sure that it was thinned down enough, and I painted this into a smaller area where that lava is going to be flowing between the rocks. I would recommend actually having a few reference pictures of lava, as I did do an attempt before this and it turned out terrible. So I then moved on to using Flash Gets Yellow, once again painting an even smaller area. This is going to make sure that this reads as the lava is cooling down as it gets closer to the rocks, and the lighter the colour goes in the middle, that is where the hotter parts are. So you're going to be doing this for a fair few layers, and then finish the base by hand with a paintbrush and just painted a little slither of Dawn Yellow towards the centre. Now for the jungle base, I actually went a little bit further and used a variety of materials. I began by painting the area that was going to have static grass later using some Sterling mud. I applied this using a tongue depressor or a lolly stick, whichever one you want to call it, you might have to search for it. I then used a bit of this dirt that I found outside. Would you believe it, the earth's made of the stuff, you haven't got to go out and buy any special. I sprinkled this over all the areas that I've just added that paint. I then glued some roots that I found in the brown bin. If you're not from the UK, then the brown bin is your garden waste bin. And I just super glued this to the bottom of some cork. This did get a little bit fiddly, so I then decided that I was going to balance the roots on and apply the glue straight to it. By doing it this way, I was able to save a bit of time, as I didn't have to sit picking all the super glue off my skin afterwards. The cork was then applied to the base, using the same technique as before, just a dollop of super glue and pressing it in place, allowing that cork to absorb a lot of the glue. Another piece of root was then glued in front of it, just to make it look a little more visually interesting. Then I applied some Mod Podge. I used the matte variety and a bit of a crap paintbrush here. I'm just spreading that across, ready for the static grass. This is actually the first time that I'm using this static grass applicator. I've had it for a couple of months now, and I've never actually been able to use it, so I gave it a go this time. Don't bully me if I'm doing it wrong. I probably didn't add enough into the applicator, which is why it was a bit spotty. But overall, I think it turned out quite good. I then loaded up the airbrush with, I think I started with Sotek Green, spraying that over the grass to try and make it a little bit more natural, before then moving on to a darker blue. And this is going to work as our darker shades. You may have noticed that I've actually applied a couple of those barbs that I got from a Citadel kit. These are little plants that are going to make this area look a little bit more lived in and a lot more natural. I then did a kind of a zenithal highlight using some Moot Green. This is going to cover a large part of the base, and this is going to keep it looking natural and lush. If you don't actually own an airbrush, a lot of this can be done with rattle cans. I've not experimented with it myself, or you could even try it with dry brushing. If you give it a go, let me know, share your pictures on Instagram at Morrigan's Creations. I then made the leaves look a little bit different from the rest of the base by painting in with a little bit more of that Moot Green. Did dilute it quite a bit, making sure that I got some nice thin coats, building up towards the edges and making sure the highlights are at the topmost points of the plant. Looking back, I think I'd probably try a few different leaf colours, making the plants look a little bit different between each other than the shape of them. Maybe some colder colours like blues or purples, make this look like a bit more like an alien planet, something that the Tyranids could be living on. Or perhaps you just want to keep them green and have it more something suited for the Sylvaneth. After taking a step back for a couple of hours, I decided that it did look a little too monotone, so I broke out some static grass that had some flowers on. I cut these down to a smaller size as they were a bit too large for what I was going for, and I picked out a couple of colours, 2 or 3, I think I picked out some white ones as well, and I pushed them all around where I think they'd grow. To finish off the base, I then started to scrape away a little bit of that static grass and painted some more of that sterling mud, making it look like this area has been trodden down a little bit and some of that mud has been kicked up. I know the commentary hasn't been the best for this video. It is something that I'm looking into improving, and perhaps I should go back to writing scripts. If you find any of this useful, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Thanks for watching.